When you're young, you never think your life is going to turn into one of those twisted stories you hear about over a few beers with friends. At 28, I thought I had it all figured out. I had a good job at a tech firm, a great house in the suburbs, and the most beautiful wife anyone could ask for. Sarah was perfect, or at least I thought she was. Blonde, petite, and full of life. She had this laugh that could light up a room, and from the moment we met, I was hooked. We married just a couple of years after dating, convinced we were that couple everyone envied. But you know what they say, nothing is ever as it seems. So we worked hard. Sarah was a teacher, molding young minds while I crunched numbers and analyzed code. She always said she loved her job, but I noticed a change about a year into our marriage. It wasn't immediate, nothing dramatic. She started spending more time with her family, or at least that's what she told me. Her mother was sick, she said, needing constant attention. The drive back to her hometown wasn't far, just about 2 hours, and she'd spend a couple of weekends a month there, maybe more. I'll be honest, I never suspected anything. I loved her. I trusted her completely. We'd been through the honeymoon phase, but I still thought we were solid. We had our routines. Every morning I'd wake up to the smell of coffee brewing, her already dressed for the day in her neat teacher outfits. She was always so meticulous, so together. If anything, I admired how well she managed to juggle work, taking care of her sick mother, and still be the amazing wife she always was or seemed to be. We didn't have kids, though I knew she wanted them. I did too, but not yet. I wanted to be more settled in my career before we brought another life into the world. She seemed to agree, though I could tell the biological clock ticked a little louder for her than it did for me. The first few months of her traveling were normal. She'd leave on Friday night, be back by Sunday afternoon, and everything would go back to how it always was. But as time passed, things began to feel off. I can't quite put my finger on it. At first, it was subtle. She started to stay later, sometimes not coming back until Monday morning, claiming her mum's condition had worsened. I wanted to be a supportive husband, so I didn't question her. I couldn't. It wasn't in me to doubt her, not when I'd vowed to stand by her through everything. But there were moments. You know, those strange, fleeting moments when the world feels a little off-kilter, but you shake it off because you're not ready to face the truth. That's how I felt when Sarah would cancel date nights or look at her phone with a strange smile. I convinced myself it was nothing. Her mum is sick, she's under stress, I'd repeat in my head, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut. Things between us in the bedroom were still good, not great, but good. The usual routine, though she seemed distracted, maybe even distant. When I'd ask how her weekend had been, her answers were short, almost rehearsed, like she was ticking off a mental list of what she was supposed to say. Mom's getting worse. She didn't sleep well. I had to stay up with her all night. I bought it. Of course I did. It's your wife, how could you not believe her? But there were cracks, small ones. I'd noticed little changes, her hair done differently when she returned, the faintest hint of a cologne, the definitely glowering linger on her clothes. When I asked her about it, she laughed it off, saying I was imagining things. You're being paranoid, she said with that sweet smile, her blue eyes sparkling as if to reassure me. I told myself I was. I mean, she loved me, didn't she? I busied myself with work, diving deeper into projects, burying myself under deadlines. It was easier than confronting the growing pit of unease that had taken root in my stomach. So every time she left, I'd sit alone in the house, wondering why I felt so damned anxious. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was overthinking things. Sarah wasn't the cheating type. She wasn't tight. But things continued to shift. She started keeping her phone on silent, something she never used to do, and she'd be texting someone late at night, her back turned toward me in bed. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off. It's just work stuff, she'd say, or family stuff. Always something. Always an excuse. I wanted to believe her, but the distance between us grew a little more with every lie. One Friday, she packed her bags for yet another trip. She kissed me goodbye with that same distracted peck on the cheek and drove off. I watched her car disappear down the street, the nagging feeling in my gut stronger than ever. Little did I know, that weekend was going to change everything. That weekend, things took a turn. Not because of anything dramatic, at least not at first, but something gnawed at me in a way it hadn't before. The unease had become constant, like a low hum in the background of every thought. Till by now, I'd trained myself to push the doubts away, but this time I couldn't shake it. So I spent that entire Saturday pretending to be productive, but really I was waiting for some signal, some clue. Anything. Sarah had left around noon that Friday, telling me her mother had taken a turn for the worse. It might be bad this time, she said, almost as if she was preparing me for a longer trip. I gave her a hug, told her to keep me updated, and let her go, same as always. But this time, it felt different. I couldn't explain it, but something was definitely off. She seemed too casual, too relaxed for someone dealing with a family crisis. Her mind was elsewhere. She hadn't mentioned her mother much in the days leading up to this trip. Usually she'd be on the phone with her sister, whispering updates, discussing what they could do to help. This time there was silence, no phone calls, no late-night conversations about healthcare plans. I tried to shrug it off, telling myself she was just dealing with the stress differently. But a part of me knew something was wrong. I poured myself a drink and sat down on the couch that evening, staring at my phone, waiting for her to call or text. It was almost like I expected something to go wrong. Usually Sarah would send me a message as soon as she got to her mother's place. But that night, silence, no text, no call. By midnight, I still hadn't heard from her. That's when I felt the first real wave of panic. I texted her, "Hey babe, everything okay? Let me know when you get there." Nothing. The message sat there, unread. I tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. I told myself not to overreact. Maybe her phone had died, or maybe she was just exhausted from the drive and had gone straight to bed. But by Sunday morning, I hadn't heard a thing. I thought about driving down there, just to check in. I mean, she'd probably think I was crazy, but I'd rather look like an idiot than sit here, stewing in my own paranoia. I even packed a small bag and sat in the car for a good 15 minutes, debating whether to hit the road or not. But then, just as I was about to turn the ignition, my phone buzzed. It was Sarah, finally. Her text was short: "Sorry, didn't see your message. Everything's fine, just tired." I stared at the screen, my stomach churning. That's it. Just everything's fine. I wanted to believe her, but it felt off. Her words were always so precise when it came to her mother's health, but now there was no mention of her condition, no details. Something didn't sit right with me. I felt like a paranoid asshole, but the doubt was there, and it wasn't going away. That afternoon, I decided to call Sarah's sister, Emily. She and I weren't super close, but I got along well enough. I figured if anyone could give me a better picture of what was going on with her mom, it would be Emily. "Hey, it's James," I said when she picked up, trying to keep my voice casual. "Just wanted to check in on Sarah's mum. She seemed pretty stressed when she left, and I haven't heard much. How are things over there?" There was a pause on the other end. "Mum?" Emily sounded confused. "She's okay. I mean, nothing's really changed." "What do you mean, stressed?" I could feel my pulse quickening. Sarah told me her condition had worsened. "That's why she went down there this weekend." Another pause, this one longer. "No, I haven't seen Sarah," Emily said slowly, "and Mom's been fine." "Are you sure she went to visit her?" At that moment, it felt like the ground beneath me shifted. Emily's voice faded into the background as my mind raced. I muttered some half-baked excuse to end the conversation, my heart pounding in my chest. What the hell was going on? Sarah hadn't even gone to see her mom, so where the fuck was she? That's when my mind began to spiral. What if everything I'd been ignoring wasn't just paranoia? What if she really wasn't visiting her mother this whole time? I had no idea where she was, and suddenly every excuse, every cancelled date night, every mysterious late-night text came rushing back, hitting me like a sledgehammer. I sat there staring at my phone, waiting for her to explain herself. But the longer I waited, the angrier I got. I didn't call her. I didn't text her again. Instead, I began going through every scenario in my head, each one worse than the last. Maybe it was nothing, but maybe it was everything. When she came home that Monday morning, I was waiting for her. I had barely slept, sitting in the dark, thinking about what I was going to say. The moment she walked through the door, I could tell something was up. She was too calm, too casual. "Hey," she said, giving me that same distracted kiss on the cheek as she dropped her bags by the door. "Sorry, I didn't get to call much this weekend. Mom needed a lot of help." My mouth went dry. I wanted to ask her. I wanted to confront her right then, there, but the words wouldn't come out. My mind was spinning too fast. I watched her move around the house like everything was fine, like nothing was wrong. How could she act so normal? "Everything okay with your mom?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She nodded, her back to me as she unpacked her things. "Yeah, same as usual. It's hard, you know, but we're managing." I stared at her, waiting for her to mention anything about Emily, about the fact that she hadn't actually been there, but she didn't. She went about her routine like she hadn't just lied to my face. That was the moment I knew. I couldn't prove it yet, but I knew. The worst part was that she still looked so much like the woman I had fallen in love with. How could the same woman who kissed me goodbye with such warmth be capable of this kind of deception? I spent the rest of that week in a daze, going through the motions of work, pretending everything was fine. But the truth gnawed at me, louder and louder with every passing day. And then, one night, everything came crashing down. The day everything blew up started like any other. I was at work, going through spreadsheets, my mind a million miles away, still trying to make sense of Sarah's recent behavior. That uneasy feeling I'd been pushing down for weeks had settled in my chest, making it hard to focus on anything. I couldn't shake it. And to be honest, I was starting to doubt my own sanity. Was I really seeing things that weren't there? Was I just being paranoid? That's when I got the message that would change everything. It wasn't from Sarah. It wasn't from anyone I knew, really. Just an unknown number flashing on my phone screen with a short, cryptic text. "We need to talk about Sarah. She's been lying to you." I stared at it for what felt like forever, my heart pounding in my ears. A part of me wanted to ignore it, throw my phone across the room, and pretend I hadn't seen it. But deep down, I knew this was the moment I'd been waiting for, or dreading. The truth finally staring me in the face. I texted back, my hands shaking. "Who is this?" The response was quick, "Jake. I'm the guy she's been seeing. I didn't know she was married. I'm sorry." That was it. That was the fucking hammer to the chest. Every suspicion I'd ever had, every sleepless night, every time she came home late or made an excuse to leave it all clicked. Sarah wasn't visiting her sick mother. She wasn't staying late at work. She wasn't busy with friends. She was with him, Jake. Jake. I felt the blood drain from my face, my body going cold as the reality sank in. Sarah had been cheating on me. All this time, while I was sitting at home, trusting her, supporting her, loving her, she had been off with some other guy. I don't remember much of the next few minutes. I stood up, walked out of the office without a word, and found myself sitting in my car just staring at the steering wheel, my mind blank. Rage, betrayal, disbelief, it all came in waves, crashing over me, one after the other. I called Jake. I needed to hear it from him. I needed to know everything. He picked up after a few rings, his voice unsure. "Hello." I didn't waste any time. "It's James. You said you've been seeing Sarah? My wife?" There was a pause on the other end, and then Jake sighed. "Yeah, I'm sorry, man. I didn't know she was married. He told me she was single. We've been seeing each other for a few months now. I only found out about you recently, and I couldn't keep it to myself. I felt like you deserved to know. Months. She'd been with him for months. I felt like I was going to be sick. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to keep my voice steady. How did you find out she was married?" Jake hesitated. I noticed she was acting weird, secretive, and I did some digging. I found her Facebook profile, saw she was married to you. That's when I confronted her about it. She admitted it, but she said you two were having problems, that you were going to split up soon. My chest tightened. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. Sarah, my Sarah, lying through her teeth, spinning some story to keep her double life going. How had I been so blind? "Look," Jake continued, "I'm not trying to stir shit up. I'm done with her. I just thought you should know what's been going on behind your back. I don't know what else to say, man. I'm sorry." I hung up without another word, my mind reeling. I couldn't stay there, couldn't just sit in that car and let it all swallow me whole. I had to confront her. I had to hear it from her mouth. By the time I got home, Sarah was there, sitting on the couch with her legs curled up beneath her, flipping through her phone like it was just another normal day. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, just watching her, trying to reconcile the woman I loved with the woman Jake had described. It didn't add up. How could she look so calm, so normal? How could she act like nothing had changed when she'd been living a fucking lie? "Sarah," I said, my voice low, but she didn't look up. "Hey," she replied casually, not even glancing my way. "You're home early." I clenched my fists at my sides, trying to control the surge of anger rising in my throat. Who the hell is Jake? That got her attention. Her body tensed, her phone slipping from her hand onto the couch. She looked up at me, her eyes wide, caught like a deer in headlights. For a second, I thought I saw a flash of fear in her eyes, but then she quickly recovered, her face smoothing over, trying to play it cool. "Jake," she repeated, feigning confusion. "I don't know what you're talking about." I took a step closer, my voice sharp. "Don't lie to me, Sarah." I spoke to him. He told me everything. She froze, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find the right words, the right excuse. But there was no way out. Not this time. She knew she was caught. She started, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean for it to happen." "Didn't mean for it to happen?" I laughed, the sound bitter and cold. "You didn't mean for it to happen? You've been fucking him for months, Sarah. Months. How do you not mean for something like that to happen?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't care. Not anymore. I couldn't believe anything she said, not after all the lies. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice shaking. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I love you, James. I do." The rage in my chest burned hotter. "You love me?" I spat. "You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around, screwing some other guy behind my back, and you have the nerve to say you love me?" She stood up, her hands trembling as she reached for me. But I took a step back, shaking my head. I couldn't let her touch me. Not now. Not after everything. I never wanted to hurt you, she cried, her voice cracking. I didn't know how to stop it. I was scared. I was confused. Scared? Confused? I repeated, my voice rising. That's the best you can come up with? You're unbelievable, Sarah. I trusted you. I fucking trusted you. And this is what you do. How long has this been going on? She wiped at her tears, sniffling. A few months. And you've been lying to me every time you went to visit your mom. She nodded, barely able to look me in the eye. I'm so sorry. And I stood there, my hands shaking with anger, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to throw everything we had right back in her face. But another part of me, the part that had loved her for years, was just broken. I couldn't believe this was happening. I can't do this, I muttered, turning away from her. I need to get out of here. She started to sob, but I didn't care. I walked out of the house, slamming the door behind me, my mind spinning. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. Everything was falling apart. I didn't sleep that night. After storming out of the house, I drove aimlessly for hours, the city lights blurring into streaks, as I tried to make sense of everything. Sarah's words, her excuses, her tears, they kept replaying in my head, like a broken record. And no matter how hard I tried to shut them out, they just wouldn't go away. By the time the sun started to rise, I found myself parked at the edge of a public park. The morning was quiet, peaceful, completely at odds with the storm raging inside me. I sat there, staring blankly at the horizon, feeling like I was suspended in some surreal nightmare. There were no answers, no quick fixes. I couldn't go back to the life I thought I had, and I didn't know how to move forward. I was still in that daze when my phone buzzed again. For a second, I thought it was Sarah, maybe trying to reach out, desperate to explain or beg for forgiveness. But it wasn't her. It was Jake, the last person I wanted to talk to. His message was brief. I'm sorry about everything. If you need to talk, or if there's anything I can do, let me know. I wanted to throw my phone out the window. What the hell could he do now? What could anyone do? But as I sat there, the anger I felt toward him began to twist into something else. The guy hadn't known. He didn't know about me, about our marriage. He was just as much in the dark as I'd been. He had been played too. And that's when the idea hit me. If anyone could help me confront Sarah, really get to the bottom of this mess, it was Jake. He had been part of her other life. He knew things I didn't. It was a long shot, but I had nothing left to lose. I texted him back, we need to meet. An hour later, I found myself sitting across from him at a small coffee shop on the outskirts of town. Jake was younger than I'd expected, maybe in his early 30s. Tall, lean, with a look of exhaustion etched across his face, like he hadn't slept much either. His eyes, dark and tired, met mine with a mix of guilt and sympathy. James, he started, but I cut him off. Let's just get this over with, I said flatly, leaning back in my chair. Tell me everything. Jake nodded, rubbing a hand over his stubbled jaw. Look, man, I didn't know. When we met, she said she was single, and I had no reason to doubt her. We started seeing each other casually, but it got serious fast. I guess I should have noticed the signs, but I didn't. Not until a couple of weeks ago. He paused, as if weighing his next words. That's when I found out she was married. I confronted her, asked her what the hell was going on. She broke down, told me everything about you, your marriage, how she was unhappy and confused, but wasn't ready to leave you. I felt a sharp pang in my chest, like someone had punched me in the gut. Unhappy. That word hit me harder than I expected. We'd had our rough patches, sure, but I never thought Sarah was unhappy. I never thought she'd seek comfort in someone else's arms. Jake continued. She said she loved you, but she didn't know how to stop what we had. I felt like shit, man. I didn't want to be part of something like that, so I told her it was over. Then I found your number and figured I had to tell you. You deserve to know. I stared at the table between us, the wood grain blurring as my vision clouded with anger and pain. How long? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated. About 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies, deceit, and betrayal. I clenched my fists under the table, my nails digging into my palms. I had been living in ignorance, while Sarah was out there building a second life with this guy sneaking around behind my back. And for what? Because she was unhappy. Where would you meet? I asked, still trying to piece together how she managed to pull this off without me ever finding out. Mostly at my place, Jake admitted, looking uncomfortable. Sometimes we'd meet at a hotel, halfway between here and where her mom lives. My stomach turned. I could picture it too clearly, Sarah sneaking away, making up some excuse about her mom's condition, while she was actually spending the weekend in a hotel bed with him. It was all so fucking disgusting. I took a deep breath, trying to keep the rage from boiling over. Did she ever say why? I mean, why cheat? Why not just tell me? Jake looked down, guilt flashing across his face. She said she didn't want to hurt you. She didn't know how to leave. It was like she was stuck between two lives. I don't know, man. I'm sorry. I really am. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of it all pressing down on me. This was my life now, a fucking joke. My wife, the woman I had loved, trusted, and built a life with, was some kind of stranger, and I couldn't wrap my head around it, couldn't understand how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat. There's one more thing, he said, his voice low. I didn't want to tell you, but I think you should know. I looked up at him, my jaw clenched. What? He hesitated again, clearly not wanting to drop another bomb, but knowing he had to. She's planning to leave you. She mentioned it once, said she was trying to figure out the right time. I didn't think she meant it, but now I don't know. That hit me like a truck. She was planning to leave? After all this time, after all the lies, she was just going to walk out like I meant nothing? I felt like my entire world was collapsing around me. Every memory, every moment we'd shared, now tainted by the knowledge that she'd been planning her exit all along. I can't fucking believe this, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. I'd been sitting at home, clueless while she was out there planning to leave me. What the hell did I do wrong? Jake shook his head. You didn't do anything, man. Some people, they just can't be satisfied, no matter how good they have it. I think Sarah's one of those people. I'm sorry. I wish I had better answers for you. I sat there in silence, the weight of everything crashing down on me. There was no going back now, no fixing this. Sarah had made her choice, and now I had to make mine. But before I could even figure out what that was, there was one thing left to do. I'm going to confront her, I said, my voice cold and hard. I want you there. Jake's eyes widened. You sure about that? I don't want to make things worse. I'm sure, I said, standing up. She's been lying to both of us, and she deserves to face the consequences. If you're serious about ending things with her, then you'll help me do this. He nodded reluctantly. All right, I'll be there. That Friday, Sarah's family was having a barbecue, a big gathering of her parents, siblings, cousins, the whole deal, the perfect stage. I knew it was cruel, but I didn't care anymore. She had humiliated me for months. It was time for her to feel the same. Jake and I arrived together. He was nervous, shifting from foot to foot, but I was stone cold. I'd been living with this pain for too long. There was nothing left to feel but the need for justice. We walked into the backyard, the sound of laughter and the smell of grilled food filling the air. Sarah was there, smiling and chatting with her family, looking like the perfect wife, the perfect daughter. When she saw me, her smile faltered. Then she saw Jake beside me, and her face went pale. I walked right up to her, Jake following close behind. The conversations around us quieted, and I could feel her family's eyes on us, confusion and curiosity filling the air. James, what Sarah started, but I didn't let her finish. Why don't you tell everyone the truth, Sarah? I said, my voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Tell them about Jake. Tell them about the affair. Or should I? Her face crumpled, her eyes wide with panic. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Around us, her family exchanged confused glances, whispers starting to spread. I glanced at Jake, who stepped forward, his face hard. I've been seeing Sarah for the past 6 months, he said, his voice steady. I didn't know she was married, but now I do, and now you all do too. The reaction was instant. Gasps, shocked faces, and then the inevitable barrage of questions from her family. Sarah's mother looked horrified, her father's face red with rage. But Sarah, she just stood there, frozen, her eyes filling with tears as she realized there was no way out. No more lies to tell, no more excuses. It was over. It's over. The backyard fell into an eerie silence, the weight of the truth settling over everyone like a storm cloud. Sarah stood there, her face pale, eyes wide as if she was seeing her world collapse in slow motion. It was a far cry from the woman I'd once loved, vibrant, confident, the kind of person who could light up a room with her laughter. Now, all I saw was a liar, a stranger I didn't recognize. Her family was still processing the bombshell. Her mother looked like she'd just been slapped, clutching her chest as if the betrayal had physically wounded her. Her father's face twisted in anger, his hands balling into fists as if ready to hit something or someone. The whispers among the relatives grew louder, the murmurs of disbelief rippling through the crowd like a slow-burning fire. Finally, Sarah found her voice, but it was shaky, desperate. James, please, she began, stepping toward me with her hands out, as if reaching for something solid in the middle of her unraveling world. I can explain. This isn't what it looks like. I shook my head, the anger simmering just below the surface, threatening to explode. There's nothing left to explain, Sarah. I know everything. You've been lying to me for months. You've been lying to all of us. Her eyes flicked toward Jake, who was standing there, his expression unreadable. I could see the guilt written all over his face. But he wasn't the one I cared about anymore. He was a casualty of her deceit, just like me. I made a mistake, she stammered, her voice cracking as the first tears spilled down her cheeks. I was confused, I didn't know what to do, but I love you. I didn't want to lose you. Love me? I barked, my voice rising. You don't love me, Sarah. You don't lie to the person you love. You don't fuck someone else behind their back while telling them you're visiting your sick mother. The crowd around us gasped, her father stepping forward with rage written all over his face, but I didn't care. I wanted everyone to hear this. I wanted them to know what kind of person she really was. Sarah's sobs grew louder, and she fell to her knees, covering her face with her hands. So I'm sorry, she choked out, her words muffled by her tears. I'm so sorry. But the words felt hollow, meaningless. They couldn't undo the months of betrayal, the lies, the nights I'd spent alone while she was with him. They couldn't erase the fact that everything I thought I knew about my life had been a fucking illusion. I took a deep breath, trying to regain some semblance of control. It's too late for apologies, Sarah, I said quietly, the anger in my chest finally turning cold. I'm done. We're done. Her head snapped up, her tear-streaked face twisting in desperation. No, please, James. We can fix this. I'll do anything. I'll end it with Jake. I swear. Jake stood there silently, his eyes fixed on the ground, clearly not wanting to be part of this disaster anymore. He looked like he wanted to disappear, to melt into the background and never be seen again. I didn't blame him. You already ended it with Jake, I said, my voice flat, and now you've ended it with me. The finality in my words seemed to hit her like a physical blow. She let out a sob, doubling over as if the weight of her actions had finally come crashing down on her. But it was too late for tears, too late for regret. I turned away, unable to look at her any longer. I could hear her family's whispers growing louder, the judgment in their voices unmistakable. I could see her father's eyes blazing with anger, her mother's tears of shame. She'd not only destroyed our marriage, but she'd also shattered her relationships with her own family. There was no coming back from this. Jake finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. I'm sorry, James. I didn't know she was married. I wouldn't have. I cut him off with a wave of my hand. It's not your fault. You didn't know. But now you do, and now it's over. He nodded, his expression filled with a mix of guilt and relief. He looked like he wanted to say more, but there was nothing left to be said. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd, leaving Sarah sobbing on the ground in the middle of the wreckage she'd created. I stood there for a moment longer, taking in the scene her family's shocked faces, her broken sobs, the quiet murmur of disbelief from the guests. This wasn't how I'd imagined our life together would end. But there it was, laid out in the cold light of day. The truth, ugly and raw, for everyone to see. I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. There was no victory in this, no justice that would undo what had been done. All I felt was the weight of the betrayal, the hollow emptiness where our love used to be. Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving her to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. The divorce was quick. Sarah didn't fight it. She barely showed up for the proceedings, looking gaunt and defeated, a shell of the woman I had once known. We sold the house, split the assets. There were no kids to complicate things, thank God. After it was over, I left the city. I couldn't stay there, surrounded by memories of what once was, of the life we'd built on lies. I moved across the country, threw myself into work, tried to rebuild. But no matter how far I ran, the scars of her betrayal were always with me. Jake and I never spoke again. He moved on with his life, and I with mine. We were two men caught in the same web, trying to escape the wreckage left behind by a woman who had played us both. As for Sarah, I heard bits and pieces through the grapevine. She'd lost touch with most of her family, cut off by the people who once adored her. Last I heard, she was living alone in a small apartment, working a dead-end job. The woman who once had everything had lost it all. I should have felt something satisfaction, vindication, but all I felt was emptiness. There were no winners in this story, only casualties. Life goes on, though. It has to. And with each passing day, the memories of Sarah, of our marriage, of everything that happened fade just a little bit more. I don't know if I'll ever fully recover from the betrayal, but I'm learning to live with it, one day at a time.